The place in the application where I would like to use the modal dialog is in the admin section, because it is from here where you can promote an employee into management. And once an employee has been promoted into management, they don't do any useful work, so they disappear from the screen. It might be nice to confirm that we really want to promote someone before they get removed from the list. So over in shell.html, I have already included the UI bootstrap script. It comes in after Angular. And in module.js, the module definition for this application, I have a dependency on UI.bootstrap. And that means what I could do in my admin controller is ask Angular to inject the modal service for me. And down here at the bottom of the controller, I have the event handler for the ng-click directive for that promote button. You can see it's very simple code, just remove the employee. In this case, it's just going to remove an employee from an array. You can imagine that calls back to a web server and ultimately ends up in a database. With the modal service, one way I could approach this is do a modal.open, and ultimately I can get back a promise from modal.open that tells me if the user confirmed this promotion or not. It's a wonderful use of promises because this is very similar to making a network call. It's an asynchronous action. I need to wait for something to happen after I open the modal. But the problem is when I open a modal, I need to specify all sorts of options like the template for the dialog, the controller for the dialog. There's all sorts of code that goes in here, and I really sort of lose the essence of what I'm trying to do, which is simply confirm that we want to remove the employee, and then, if we have confirmed, remove the employee. So one of the approaches I take in software design quite often is to write the code that I would like to see, and then see if I can make that code work. Inside of this promote functionality, it might be nice to invoke a function, confirm promotion, for this employee, expect that to return a promise, so I can say then, remove employee. And that's nice, simple code that's very readable and doesn't have all this noise about dialog options and template URLs and controllers. Let's see if we can make this work. I would expect confirm promotion to be another function here inside the controller, or even a service that I inject into the controller. So all this code about opening the modal, setting up the template URL, it's all going to be in a different file, in a different component, in a service, confirm promotion. I already have a file set up for confirm promotion. It's included in the page. Confirm promotion will be a service, and this is the factory method that I am registering for this service. Now, typically, your factory methods will return an object, and that object has an API, and that API really defines your service. But in this case, I don't want to return an object. I want the service to be a function. So when someone injects this service, they get a function. And the only thing they really need to do with that function is invoke it. In this case, passing in the employee that they want to confirm. This service will have a dependency on the modal service. We are pushing that responsibility down into the service. It's from here where I will call modal.open, and I need to pass in some options that describe what this dialog will look like and how it should behave. One such option would be the template to load that forms the URL for this modal dialog. I already have one written. It's in the templates folder. It's called confirm promotion.html. And let's take a quick look at that template. When you're building a dialog with Bootstrap, you have classes that you can use to define the header for the dialog, the body of the dialog, and the footer of the dialog. It's inside of the footer where I will have buttons where the user can click yes, I'm sure, or no, let's cancel this operation. And currently this template is very generic. It's saying you are about to promote someone, are you sure? It would be nice if we actually use the employee's name. So let's use model.employee.firstname and pretend that we'll get some binding eventually so that I can say model.employee.firstname and model.employee.lastname. And what this will force me to do is have a property on the scope that is in effect for this view, a property called model, and attached to that property will be an employee property. And it turns out this is very simple to do. Inside of the options for my dialog, I can put a controller in charge of this dialog. And I could name a controller here, or I can provide an inline function. And since this is a very simple function, I'm just going to use an anonymous function. That's also nice because what I can do inside of this function is capture a reference to the employee that was passed into the service function. I'll capture that, attach it to my controller instance, and then if I expose this controller as model, I will now have a model property on my scope that will point to my controller instance, and my controller instance will have an employee property. Let me save everything and refresh this page and see what this looks like. I'll click to promote an employee, and you can see there's a couple things that happen. Yes, the dialog launches, it looks good, it displays the employee name, but I'm also getting an error, cannot read property then of undefined. And this is because I really haven't set up anything to process the result of this dialog as yet. So far, I've just been focused on getting the right template and getting some data into the controller so that we can display the employee name. That specific error I was getting that I cannot call a method called then on an undefined object is because currently confirm promotion is not returning a promise that I can invoke then on. So what I'm going to need to do from this service is make sure that I return modal.open, and it is .result that will deliver that promise back to the caller. And now once the promise goes back to the caller, I'm saying call remove employee if the user has accepted this dialog, and this remove employee function expects an employee to be passed into it. So what we're going to need to do is make sure that if the user clicks on the yes button, we resolve this promise successfully and pass in an employee object. If anything else happens, if the user closes that dialog without clicking yes, we need to reject that promise. And I can actually do this from my template, confirmPromotion.html. Because inside of a modal dialog, I'll have my own scope object that the modal service sets up, which is good since I'm adding things to the scope. But also on this scope will be two $ methods directly on the scope object. One is called dismiss. If I just invoke dismiss, that is a way of canceling this dialog and rejecting the promise. And there's also $close, which will resolve the promise. And when I invoke close, I can pass in an object that will be delivered to the success handler for the promise. And that means, ultimately, since I am returning a promise from confirm promotion and resolving the promise and passing in an employee, when the user clicks yes, over here in the admin controller, if I say confirm the promotion and then remove an employee, I should get my employee object inside of here. So let's save everything and give this a try. Refresh. Let's start promoting employees. Let's confirm this one. That one seemed to work. Let's cancel this one. That was not removed from the list, which is good. And now I have a nice confirmation dialog that I can use on this page. And that dialog is nicely encapsulated inside of a service so that all this infrastructure code about templates and controllers and setting up the model, it's all nicely encapsulated in a function that I pass around as a service, and it keeps my controller code nice and simple and readable.